so, how about, telling people, eat healthy, lose weight? How about these,
No, gyms were closed. Beaches were closed.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was just so chaotic and so, the best word is disgusting. That's all I can say. And it's really a shame for humanity to have handled it that way. They could have easily done, turned off the fire, tried, said, hey, you guys, you doctors on the front line, do whatever you want, turn off the fire, save as many lives as possible. Here's the vaccine. Let's try the vaccine. Let's turn off the fire. We haven't turned off this fire yet, by the way.
No.
So, why? Because we're not managing it properly, in my opinion, still to this day.
Perfect. Welcome to Far Out with Faust, everybody. I am Faust Chicho, and today I am honored and delighted to be joined by Dr. Sabine Hazan. Dr. Hazan is a specialist in gastroenterology. She's internal medicine and hepatology. She's used her expertise in many regards over the last 2 decades. She's the founder and CEO of the Malibu Specialty Center and Ventura Clinical Trials, where she conducts and oversees clinical trials for cutting-edge research on various medical issues. She's a top clinical investigator for multiple companies, and she's the series editor of Practical Gastroenterology on the Microbiome, and a peer-reviewed journal that reaches over 18,000 gastroenterologists. She was and is a speaker for the World Congress of Digestive Disease, the Microbiome Congress, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. She's the founder and CEO of Biome, and that's a genetic sequencing research laboratory that, in the company's words, is trying to crack the genetic code of 1 trillion bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live in our gut, with the hope to find cures to diseases that they feel are caused by altercation of the gut flora. And this is following the vision and the pioneer work on fecal microbiota transplant by Dr. Thomas Barodi. Barodi, did I say his last name right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for beaming in, Dr. Hazan. I know how busy you are, so I appreciate your time.
We've tried to make this happen like twice already, so 3 times the charm.
I know, 3 times the charm, always. So much to get into. We were just talking a little bit, kind of off the record, about one of the events that really kind of, I guess, was a bit of a slap in the face for you. But I'm sure that was just recently, and you've been doing this work for a long time. So you've had extensive clinical trials, and if you realized probably long before many of us how intensely the microbiome can impact our human health, but not just, what we think of as our immune system, but happiness, our moods, or the regulation of our entire body, and even our consciousness. And would you like to walk me through like one of your most profound clinical trials, and what kind of moment led to where you are?
I think these fecal transplant is essentially the transfer of stools from a healthy donor to an unhealthy, right? And we're really at the beginning of science on this. It's really a bunch of aha moments, right? Patient with that's suicidal, psoriasis, chronic UTI, C.diff. All of a sudden, we do fecal transplant for C.diff, and the patient's no longer suicidal. Doesn't have psoriasis. So doesn't have his chronic UTI anymore. So these are like aha moments, oh my God moments, right? What happened? What's going on? And then you start calling your friends that are doing the same thing as you, and you say, hey, have you seen chronic UTI improved? And, Dr. Sahil Khanna at Mayo Clinic has done a lot of work on chronic urinary tract infections in patients, where he actually did fecal transplant on them and found that they are improving. They no longer need to be on constant antibiotics, etc. So I think that's the beginning, right? It's those 1 or 2 cases that say, wait a minute, what is going on here? Why did this happen? I'll always remember the case of Dr. Colleen Kelly, where it was 2 patients who had C.diff, and they had alopecia areata, right? Baldness in patch in different areas. And I remember looking at those cases, and both patients grew hair after fecal transplant. And I asked myself, what grows hair that when I'm taking stools from another donor to these two patients, something is growing hair, right? And to me, you know, I always have a fascination with hair because I always thought, well, maybe I should start developing a shampoo for hair, right? Because women always complain about hair. And I felt, well, maybe, you know, that's something I'm always like, I love, you know, full set of hair and everything. So I said, so he got my attention, and he got my attention because I said, I wonder if there's a microbe that is responsible for hair growth, right? I wonder if there's a balance in the microbiome or an imbalance that creates hair loss, right? An autoimmune process. Same thing with psoriasis. You know, when you start seeing a patient with psoriasis improving, you start saying, well, did I change something in the microbiome, right? So if you look back at clinical trials, and you're right, I've done Ventura Clinical Trials, was my, you know, company that was doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies for years. And when I was doing clinical trials, you know, if you look back at, you know, in Jackson Memorial, in University of Florida, where I did my GI fellowship, my first year was just in research, right? I did a whole year of research. And during those years of research, we were trying a lot of different things, you know, like antibiotics for Crohn's disease, biologics for Crohn's disease. That was really the beginning of biologics, right? And when you see the trend of clinical trials that have gone from, you know, antibiotics to biologics, and biologics for everything, right? So here we have, you know, biologics for Crohn's disease. Initially, Crohn's was the beginning. And then I remember doing a clinical trial on psoriasis. And again, it was the biologic complex, you know, concept. And I said to myself, so biologics in the gut, biologics for the skin, biologics for arthritis, maybe it's all combined. Maybe it all starts in the gut, right? Maybe what we think of, hey, we're fixing Crohn's disease is really inflammation in all these diseases that maybe starts in the gut, right? And so through this path of understanding, you know, the way that pharmaceutical companies were heading with, you know, antibiotics to biologics for everything, to now we're in the microbiome space with the possibility of fecal transplant in a capsule for everything. Again, that's what I saw. I saw, okay, well, we've done the antibiotics for everything. Now we're going to go into the biologics for everything. Think about it. Now we're actually in the messenger RNA platform. So there's a transition from biologics to messenger RNA platform. So they're going to bring that technology, and then it's probably going to fail very quickly. And then they're going to go into
failing already.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for other conditions, you know,
right.
That's a big push to start thinking, you know, cancer. I mean,
can you tell everyone what biologics are, just in case people are like, wait,
so it's medications like, for example, Remicade, Humira, the medications that you know are supposed to essentially put a Band-Aid on your inflammation, essentially. So it's medications that people have to do, you know, every 4 to 6 weeks for Crohn's disease, for psoriasis, it's an injection. So basically, you know, so we've gone from one platform to another. We're going into another platform with the messenger RNA. And to me, it's sort of, you know, what I find with all these, you know, products, it's not really a end of the game. It's not curative, you know, like think about it. Have we cured rheumatoid arthritis? No. Have we cured Crohn's disease? No. Have we cured cancer? No.
What disease have we cured?
Well, I mean, some could say we've cured H. pylori, but then some would argue and say, was H. pylori even a problem to begin with, right? Because some people would say, well, save the H. pylori because you're going to end up having reflux if you kill it. But then some people would say, well, you know, kill the H. pylori because it causes stomach cancer, right? So it depends on who you're reading. But I remember for years, you know, we thought, hey, kill, kill, kill. And then it became save, save, save. And then it became kill again. So it really is a narrative, right? All these drugs, these products, it's really like who, you know, in science, we say it's who becomes, you know, the person that gets heard of with the research, at the moment. So, everything gets proven and disproven, right? That's medicine. That's science. I remember years ago, in fact, the book behind me that has Dr. Fauci's name on it, the big medical book, forever had so many drugs that said, hey, take this for heart failure and take this for cardiomyopathy. And then it became, no, don't take these drugs because they can actually damage something else. So I think with every new technology, there is new understanding of science and medicine. And I really think we have not, we're not at that level yet. And I think we're not at that level because we've not attained any cures, in my opinion.
Right.
We keep putting Band-Aids.
We
and
haven't been.
People are tired of the Band-Aids, right?
People are very tired of the Band-Aids.
Yeah, I mean, you have a disease, and I'll always remember my mom. My mom mentioned that to me when I was, in med school, and she's like, I don't know why you're going into this field. This field, there's no cures. Diabetes, there's no cure. Hypertension, there's no cure. And, in retrospect, as you look at all this, cholesterol, there's no cure, so you have to look back and say, what have we done wrong that we have not cured one single problem? And all we've done is just given people these polypharmacies. And at the end, you just, I look at myself if I'm the patient, and I would say, well, I'm just constantly reminded every day, you have these patients with these little pill boxes and they're taking 10 pills and they have the timing and everything. And that's not a life, right? I mean, at some point it's quality versus quantity. And to me, that would not be a life. So, I strive to do better as a physician. I strive to find cures. And, that's basically why I went into the clinical trial route rather than just being your conventional gastroenterologist who just, focuses on biologics after biologics or antibiotics after antibiotics. I want to find innovations. I'm more interested in what's in the future that gives hope of a cure than curing, than just giving medications.
Treating symptoms. Yeah.
And I think, so that was what fecal transplant brought. Fecal transplant brought that idea of, wait a minute, maybe there is a cure possibility, right? Because when you have a guy with Crohn's disease who, you do fecal transplant on him and all of a sudden he doesn't have Crohn's disease, you have to say, wait a minute, why did I cure this guy, right? Or two people with alopecia areata that grow hair. And you have to say, why did I reach that in those two patients? Obviously, it's not everyone, right? Not everybody goes to the GI and they have a fecal transplant, they start growing hair or improve their suicidal ideation or improve but there are some cases, and those cases need to be looked at carefully.
Certainly.
So,
I tell I have two kids, and my oldest one he's a attentive audience, and I try to explain to him, I'm like, people are worried about bacteria, and they're taking medicine to, quote, kill bacteria. And there's literally, I don't know, almost your entire body is made up of these little organisms called bacteria. I think it's 50 trillion cells. Now, I said, now you're 11 years old. You can't understand how big of a number 50 trillion is. But let me tell you that all the stars in the Milky Way probably don't even equal 50 trillion. There's probably more bacteria. So if you had to pick a few stars and you were going to take them out because they were the ones causing the problems, do you think you would be successful in doing that? And do you think that would be good? And he was like, how would you find them? I'm like, no, it's a great question. You can't literally just find them, So we have this habit of attacking the good with the bad because it's all we know how to do. And it's a perfect way to keep people coming back for more as repeat customers, But I'm like, listen, the entire model that we have is so out of whack and so
out of whack. Yes.
It's not designed to cure anything.
It's a good business model, I'll tell you that.
That's it.
Competing
It
customers.
is.
But, I think people are going to get tired. I think people, I think about the executive, at a computer company, or the executive at a Microsoft company or whatever, who basically, is sick and wants to go back to work and, needs a quick fix. This is not a quick fix when you start with the roller coaster of disease, right? So,
No.
And because that's what it is, right? You kill a group of microbes, and then another group starts climbing up the bad ones, and then you can never recuperate the ones you've killed. And then it starts a chain reaction and a domino effect until pretty much you've lost all your good bacteria, and you're left with just the bad bacteria rummaging your gut and then traveling to the brain with the brain gut access. And therefore, you're foggy, you can't focus, you can't remember things. No energy. And then you ask yourself, well, I could remember this equation in math to do my job, but I can't remember it now. And then you go to the doctor. And of course, the doctor, we're so, we're behind in medicine because the technology is advancing and we're still here, right? Think about the microbiome. So I was in a place with a psychiatrist, and I was kind of, we were talking, and we got around to talking about COVID and finding COVID in the stools, etc. And then I said, well, the microbiome when COVID was in the stools. And he said to me, what's the microbiome? And it's unbelievable to me, right? Because he's an older psychiatrist too, right? So I go, you don't know what the microbiome is? And he goes, nope. And then I said, what about fecal transplant? Do you know what fecal transplant? Nope. What do you mean? What do you do when you do fecal transplant? I had to educate this guy and his wife, who's a physical therapist, by the way, on fecal transplant. And to me, I realized here lies the problem. You guys, the community, the naturopath, the patients, they're all educated, right? They're already like looking for their doctor for fecal transplant, right? Which don't exist, by the way, because in this country, we're only allowed to do C.diff, period. And it's very difficult to find donors. So don't,
What's the difference? Can you tell everyone the difference so they know?
What's the difference? What?
Well, you said in this country, we can't even do fecal transplant.
Yeah, you cannot do fecal transplant unless you have a diagnosis of C.diff. C.diff is a bacteria that causes diarrhea. So if you've taken too many antibiotics and you've killed your microbiome, then this little bacteria called C.diff pops up because you've killed all its families. So it pops up and it starts secreting toxins, which then travel the brain, travel the gut, and you end up having diarrhea. So these patients usually are your nursing home patients that end up in the hospital. But it's more than that, because about 10 years ago, we started seeing a lot of kids. And that's when we started realizing, well, wait a minute, maybe the cow has gotten some antibiotics. Because remember, it was about 6-7 years ago that they stopped giving cows antibiotics, right? Because they were realizing, wait a minute, this is not good, because then the kids are eating the hamburger with the antibiotics in the cow, right? From the cow. So basically these kids were coming with C.diff. We were having C.diff, which is usually in a nursing home patient. We were having it in young people. And so fecal transplant is the process of taking stools from a healthy donor and putting it into that kid. So forever we were picking fresh stools from family members or spouses or kids of the family member. And we were getting 92 to 99% success. And of course, that became a clinical trial and a pharmaceutical product. And that's where we're here. And that's why I'm talking about it, because the future is going to be microbiome, fecal material in capsules. Okay. So is it the right donor? Where's the donor from? Is it processed properly? Are there viruses that we don't know about in those stool donors? There's a lot. We're entering a world of, just no knowledge. So that's why I jumped into it, because I felt we're stepping into the crap business, pardon my and we don't even know crap. So that's it. So that's why I wrote the book, Let's Talk Shit. That's why I started speaking. That's why I got involved during the pandemic, because I wanted to showcase the power of the microbiome, right? I wanted to showcase how when you find COVID in the stools, what is the microbiome doing in severe COVID patients versus patients that were high risk exposed but never got COVID.
Yeah.
Which brings me up to my, video on YouTube that was censored and removed, where I had that discussion with a farmer. I had a discussion with a farmer. We were talking fertilizer basically, and we were talking about how, chickens go to the poop of the cows, and if the cow is vaccinated, they know not to go into that, poop because they know it. Right. So, because, chickens, when they start going into the poop of cows, it's because they're missing some nutrients, right? So they're going, or microbes. So essentially we started talking about all this, and then he told me that he never had COVID and his wife had COVID. He kissed her, he, took her saliva, put it all over his face, never got it. And he even said to me, he goes, am I that useless that COVID doesn't even want to get into my body? So that was really the first, he was one of the first ones. I said, Matt, Matt is a farmer in Kansas. And I said, I want your microbiome and I want to see your wife, because I want to see why she got it and why you didn't. And why she got it was pretty simple. She was working as a school teacher, exposed to a lot of kids, stressed, not really outdoors, lack of vitamin D, right?
Vitamin D, I was going to say.
Yeah. And he was in outdoors, vitamin D, shoveling the manure from the cows and drinking the raw milk from the cow. And he was like in there, in the environment. So he had
diverse microbiome.
Oh, his microbiome was spectacular. I mean, really diverse. And she wasn't so diverse because, here she is sterilizing with alcohol every time she goes into the classroom and killing more and more microbes. So she got COVID. She was fine, but he never got it. They slept together. They ate together. Like I said, he smushed his face with. So that was the first video that I did with him. And it was a landmark video, in my opinion, because that was the beginning of my adventures of looking at the microbiome in exposed versus, high risk versus exposed and high risk and not high risk. So, the fact that YouTube put it down and said censorship, inappropriate content for what? We're talking cows and poop. I mean, go figure. So I don't know.
It's when was it? Was it posted during the height of the pandemic?
It was at the height of the pandemic. It was during, I think it was a bit before Delta. Yeah. And literally was on for about 2 years.
And it was censored after?
It was censored recently, about a month ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was on my website. If you go to progenobiome.com website and you go to videos, you will see the video says censored and removed.
You should put it on Rumble.
He's trying to get it. He zoomed it. He posted it. He didn't think, So worst case scenario, we redo it. But it's such a shame because this was, like like I said, a landmark video of discovery. Discovery occurs on the front line of research, right? It's those epic moments where you see something. You see a patient's oxygen go up and you go, wait, what's happening? Those big aha moments that I like to call them. So, could you imagine if Sanofi Pasteur, had a discovery and then it wasn't made known or retracted? It's ridiculous. We're living in a weird world.
Weird is one word, I have another couple words that I won't say, but listen, I think it's the highest crime what has been done, because I believe that the general public, of course, had every right to know what was going on, not only with the virus itself, but the medical intervention that followed in record speed, and that information was kept from them. Not only was the treatments that were working kept from them, but they went so far as to raid, clinics and warehouses that were effectively treating it with vitamin D, and zinc and simple, IVs. The FBI raided warehouses to shut this down. This is the country that we are living in. Make no mistake about it.
And it's weird because I think there's really two sides to the FBI, right? I think there's like the good guys and the bad guys. And
no doubt.
And I think, because I treat a lot of patients in different, from FBI to, FDA to, I have a repertoire of patients. And, on the most part, I think, the agents are there to do a job, but some of them are just corrupt. And who knows if those are even like FBI. It's unbelievable to me because I think, some of the stuff that's been told or in the media, even the people that are, like I look at Pfizer, right? And Pfizer had, the people that work for Pfizer, they just can't understand what's going on with Pfizer. You know what I mean? And they work for Pfizer. So they're like, I don't understand what is going on. What is all this? It's noise. There's so much noise that those people, and that's the thing. It's like, think about it. If you want to infiltrate a country, what are you going to do? You're going to create so much noise, so much chaos to divide. Whether you're dividing because you're creating a narrative, right? Because essentially you're creating the narrative and that's what sells a market, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is part of the plan to sell a drug, right? Who knows? But definitely there is a narrative going on and there is definitely a force going on that is, I don't know what the best word to say it, but I'm going to be kind.
It's a conspiracy. It's a literal conspiracy.
I'm going to say a force that's confused. I'm going to be nice, confused. I'm going to say they don't know any better, right? So when you have somebody doing something that to you is so, oh my God, appalling.
Yeah. And
you have to ask yourself, maybe that person doesn't know. That person's reality is so altered that they believe that that's the norm, right? We are being fed, and think about it. We are being fed two different realities right now, right? You have a following of people that are like-minded because this phone gives it to you, right? So, and it's kind of funny because I look at my kid's phone and I look at my feeds, completely different. Like we joke about that, my kids and I, because we're like, wow, this is not what I'm seeing on my feed, right? So if you don't force yourself to see that other side, you are in the abyss. You are seeing only one vision of what your reality is.
But
so I think
it's most people.
Yeah, but I think it's important to stay in balance. Like I'll tend to be, on purpose. I'll say things that are, certain path to attract that narrative. And then I'll say something else on another path to attract that narrative, because I think it's so important to see both sides of the narrative, on either way, on either side, right? Because then you can make up your own mind as an individual, as a human being, as a parent, as a physician.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. I've always, I always pride myself in always being kind of middle ground and impartial.
Me too.
Not wanting to create hate, not wanting to divide, but more to see the other side and I always try to put myself in other people's shoes because, you cannot understand what it's like to be in another person. There's so many people that have insecurity problems that are, have mental illness because they were abused as children, or they have, some secret, some darkness in their family in that, just hurts them. Right. So I think, so we have to be compassionate in a way.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard because, I see these people and they have like, the world is just owes them because they've been abused, and you want to help them, but you can't really help them and I think the best help for them is to try to develop that warrior mentality, in my opinion. I think we've become a society of, victimizing people. Oh, poor you. Here's this. Here's that.
Absolutely, we have.
Poor you. Instead of, hey, you know what? Yes, I understand, but you want to save yourself now. Here, do this to empower yourself to get better. Turn the page. And it's harder said than done. Obviously,
it is. Because people have a lifetime of conditioning of giving away their power and their own sovereign responsibility as a human being. And, we get taught from a young age, from the time we're little, the moment something's wrong, we get brought to a doctor. And so we learn from a young age, unfortunately, that our health, if something goes wrong, you go to a doctor. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, except for the system that's in place. What happened when you went to the doctor? I know what happened every time I got brought to the freaking doctor. He prescribed me antibiotics.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like, oh, you have a sore throat. Let's give him some antibiotics. You know what I mean? Like, and I grew up thinking that was a good thing. And then when I got out of college, if I would get a sinus infection, I would just call my doctor and be like, hey, doc, can you give me a CPAC or whatever? Like I can tell I'm getting a sinus infection. I had no idea what I was doing. You know what I mean? It took me a while to re-educate myself and understand what an antibiotic actually is.
Right.
And then learn how it's, oh, wait a minute, why are they spraying our food with antibiotics? What, you know what I mean? Like what does an antibiotic actually do? Right. Antibiotics are great if you've been bitten by a lion in Africa and you're going to be in camp for a few days. You better have some antibiotics or you might get an infection. Chances are, they got some lions tend to have really dirty.
Although, the Africans in the Amazon and people that live in the Amazon jungle will tell you they have other ways to treat. So,
oh, I'm sure.
I think, tribes and, the Indian tribes and they had all these things, in the past. So that we're treating. So I think, we've kind of swayed away from, remember when you were a kid and you had a wound and the first thing we would do is put iodine on it, right?
Yeah.
And then that disappeared. Then it became, oh, let's give you an antibiotic topical. And then the antibiotic topical became an antibiotic by mouth. And, so it's sort of, it's an interesting system that we've created of automatically thinking that we're just giving a pill and that we're not going to have any sequela from that pill. Yeah. But I disagree because, what we've seen from C.diff anyways is, yes, you give an antibiotic, you kill the pneumonia that you had, but then you just killed a whole bunch of other good microbes that were helping you, right? And that's where the whole movement of probiotics, came on.
Yeah. Was born
really well with the understanding, well, you're killing the good stuff, so let me give you the good stuff back, right?
So we'll sell you the good stuff back, yeah.
But then again, you're like taking more pills, so you're basically taking the antibiotic and then you're taking the probiotic, and so at what point do we say precision medicine? What bug am I missing? What bug are overgrown, and how do I fix the balance back, right? Yeah. And where's the diagnostic in all this, right? So that's my goal, right? My goal is really to understand the microbiome, to develop the technology and the clinical data to understand what does Parkinson's look like? What does autism look like? What does Crohn's look like? Because only when you start with the diagnostic can you really advance the therapeutics.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you don't have a cardiac cath to tell you have a blockage in the heart, you're not going to be able to do a stent if you don't know, right?
Right.
So the diagnostic is so important before the therapeutics, right? If I didn't have a colonoscope and went into the colon and saw some polyps, well, I would never see those polyps to remove them. So the diagnostic tool becomes crucial to find the polyp and then remove. The therapy comes after the diagnostic always. So here we're putting like the cart in front of the horse in that we're saying, let's do the therapeutic first. Let's just give you some poop and let's not look at the microbiome. Let's not understand the microbiome first. Let's just give you some poop, So
Tell me about this. So I'm trying to imagine, and it's probably a lot simpler than I'm able to form the image in my head. How does one get a fecal transplant?
again, you have to have C. diff as a
You have to have C. diff. So let's
recurrence.
say if you didn't have to have C. diff, if this became more of a, you can get it like at a place that does IVs and like a like
Yeah,
a
so no,
wellness.
so it needs a lot of research to be at that
Yeah.
level. Okay. But let's say
Yeah.
we're like 50 years from now and
Right.
you're going to your doctor and you want to fix it with fecal transplant. You would need a colonoscopy and then go all the way to the cecum. So
What's the cecum?
the end of the colon. So if you know your colon is basically like a U shape, right?
Yeah.
Of your large intestine is a U shape, is U upside down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the end of it, where the remnant of the appendix is, or the appendix opening, or where the entry to the small intestine is, that's where the cecum is. So the cecum is essentially your compost bin. It's that area of the colon that doesn't move the same way as the rest of the colon. It essentially moves backwards to kind of store, the feces and and it's the machine essentially of the microbiome.
So how do you just like literally
via colonoscopy? You have to go via colonoscopy, put a scope inside a person, clean them out, and then put some poop from a healthy person into that area directly.
And that's amazing. That is crazy to think about because
trust me, I know we
yeah, I'm sure you do.
And by the way, I did not want to get into this field doing this. Okay. My friend and colleague, Dr. Neil Stolman, I remember when I was a young fellow and he would take me to these posters looking at fecal transplant for C. diff. And he said, see, this is the future. The future isn't shit. And I said, please don't make me play with it. Please. And it was so funny because here he was doing it. He was advancing science. He was speaking in front of, I remember, seeing him at these big conferences with like thousands of GI doctor. And he was like giving this big lecture on how fecal material improved the colon. And here's the colon all ugly before and then beautiful after fecal transplant. And I remember seeing all that. And I was more of the clean GI. I don't want to play with poop.
Yeah.
And then little by little, I had to do them because I was doing a lot of clinical trials for C. diff. So I was the clean approach, put the patient through a clinical trial. And if the clinical trial doesn't work, then I'm going to do fecal transplant, right?
Yeah.
And play, with poop. So, that's how I got into this.
Yeah. It's just, like my mind is going a million different directions because the fact that some people actually, grew hair from these transplants, it just speaks to the level of absorption and how many, like it must be so profound in the system that, it's signaling all kinds of different genes that possibly, were not being signaled before, and it's just so many questions.
So here, let me show you.
Okay.
So this is a case, 2 patients of Colin Kelly.
Yeah.
Alopecia areata. Okay. So you could see they're bald. And then right after, they grew hair, the 2 of them. Right?
Wow.
So what grows hair? Right? So this is 2 cases, American College of
How long did that take?
That was about a month after.
About a month after.
Yeah. And so
these
were reported by Colleen Kelly. And so when she reported that was pretty, that was like the first, wow, aha moment. So, once you see that as a first case, you then start going, okay, what about other cases? Can we do more cases? And that's basically, the path. We need to see and understand what the microbiome is doing.
Right.
And only when you kind of achieve a cure can you really understand the microbiome. So, to be stopped from trying to achieve a cure because it doesn't fit the price of the stock is just wrong.
It's totally wrong. It happens so often. Unfortunately, it's one of the biggest problems with our.
But what happens is afterwards, it does affect, it's gonna come back to haunt those that, interfere, because eventually, we all become patients at some point. And you go, look, I went into this field really for myself to understand the microbiome, because I felt, what if when I'm 70, I develop Alzheimer's? Yeah. And I'm going to say I coulda, shoulda, woulda developed a lab that could understand Alzheimer's, and I didn't. What's the worth of money if at 70 you cannot enjoy your grandchildren, right? Yeah. So you want to try to live a little bit longer on the planet. And absolutely. I think, in order to live a little bit longer, you probably need to make sure that you have a strong microbiome anyways. So, following the sheep of, just taking one pill after another, that's not a solution. So
no, it's not. I'm a big fan of Dr. Zach Bush. I'm sure you've heard of, have you heard of Dr. Zach Bush?
Zach's great.
Yeah. I love Zach too.
And he and I have kind of gone into a similar direction, very like naturopaths in a way, and we're very, holistic. And
farmer, he loves working with farmers and soil and poop. And
he's in Africa right now, and so we talk a lot. And he's doing some research, and I respect him for that. So
maybe you can put in the good word for me. I've met him and spoke to him once or twice, and I've been in touch with his people, but I'm going to get him on eventually. My platform is just starting to really take off. Yeah.
Right, perfect.
But, he's fantastic. I became aware of how vital the microbiome is through his education.
He actually is one of the pioneers, I think. You know, I was more of a clinical trial on the, front line of research and clinical trials, and doing fecal transplant. Really, that was my thing. He was the one that was, that increased the awareness, and I think that's commendable. Anybody that's, Tom Barodi with fecal transplant, he was the beginning for us. He was the first one to kind of, make us aware as gastroenterologists and open up that, that world, and also train us, hold our hand through it, It's kind of what happened, and that's the importance of being a clinician and having your peers help you, guide you in treatment, right? I mean, I remember, the first fecal transplant I did, I needed someone, Neil was like,
hold your hand.
Figure it out. I did. I figured it out. But, I have so many doctors that I talk to, gastroenterologists, that just love Dr. Barodi because he held their hand literally. And he was like, don't worry, you're going to be fine. And I think those are the people that are really commendable, to be the pioneer, to be the ones holding our hand. During COVID, what did we do on the front line? We were holding hands of doctors saying it's okay to give ivermectin 36 milligrams. I did it. My patient did fine, right? So we were holding hand. We were giving we were seeing the clinical data firsthand, and we were giving our opinion, right? I mean, that's the beauty of being in medicine and dealing first line with a virus that is deemed deadly, and being there and trying different things, doing the art of medicine, trying to save the patient, To me, that whole narrative of doing nothing until patient desaturates, that was ridiculous. And also, when did I ever need to call the government to give epinephrine for an anaphylactic reaction? Are my patients not breathing? I should be able.
And then you're going to be persecuted for it, and that's what they did. They persecuted.
That's what they did. Yes. And they used. They targeted specific doctors that, think about the doctor that gave vitamin D high dosages and was talking about it. They persecuted him, right? Because
that's right.
Oh my God, he's outside the box. He's giving He's influencing other doctors, right?
Yeah.
You know, in a way, I was lucky because I was doing the clinical trials, and I actually posted them on clinicaltrials.gov for the world to see my formula, right? I mean, that my goal was not, I mean, yes, initially it was kind of like, well, maybe I'll open a pharmaceutical company and create a combination therapy out of it. But then, you know, pretty soon it became the art of medicine as we really treated all these people. You know, some people just needed 7 drugs, you know, to survive. Some people needed 2, some people needed nothing. So I think it's really that judgment as a physician that we've accumulated over the years of treating trauma and emergencies. And so for all of a sudden the government to start stepping in and saying, wait, don't do this. We recommend you do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't fly with me. It didn't fly because, you know, I remember being on the floor of, you know, in Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, where we were taking care of HIV patients. Well, nobody was really telling us how to treat HIV patients that were, you know, vomiting blood or that were, you know, losing their mind. We learned from each other. We basically were starting to ask questions, you know, what worked for you? What did you do at that point, right? So I think, you know, that was the same attitude that I had with COVID. It's like, oh, here we go again. You know, I went from HIV to COVID, to this virulent virus.
Those viruses have something or somebody in common too. I won't name any names.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, you know, it's a shame, really. It really is a shame because, you know, I respected Dr. Fauci for his book and his knowledge and as a scientist. And it's a shame that, you know, I think a lot of us that respected him as physicians and as a physician, as a peer, as a colleague, you know, have lost the trust, have lost that respect that we had. It's too bad. Yeah. It's too bad. I mean, because you know, you look at someone like Dr. Sidney Feingold, who I, you know, took over his work and research on the microbiome. He wrote the book on anaerobic infections. I think every pharmaceutical company has benefited from his book and his work. And you look at that man and he really wanted to help autism. He really was doing everything above and beyond. And even to his last day, he was still thinking of ways to treat Alzheimer's and ways to treat these kids with autism. So, you know, you look at that and those are the people that you have to respect, right? Because there's this guy died in a small apartment. You know, Dr. Feingold didn't make any money from pharmaceutical company. In fact, his kids, you know, really, he didn't spend much time because he was always busy with doing research, etc. He really dedicated his life to research and not even acknowledged, you know, not even acknowledged. And here's a guy that to me, that's a hero. That's a hero of medicine. And there's so many. I mean, you've seen them during the pandemic. I mean, Peter McCullough, nonstop.
Peter McCullough, I mean, he's just
nonstop. He is writing data. He is reading the data. He is criticizing the data. He is publishing. He is, you know, publishing even on his own newsletter that he's submitting. You know, I mean, the guy is a hero. Why?
Yes, absolutely.
And, you know, he's an expert witness. He doesn't get paid. He does all these lectures to raise the awareness and everything, and he's not paid. And his own thing is like, he's a critical thinker.
Yeah, totally.
And
it served him his whole career. I mean, it served him enormously.
Physician.
But then,
and then to be deboarded, to remove your board certification
for doing what you've always done so well, for what you've become, you know.
For being a critical thinker. Let's remove your board certification because you do not believe in this new messenger RNA pipeline, and that contradicts everyone. I mean, really, you know, there's
a lot of problems.
Again, this is like in the olden days where two scientists would bicker about their hypothesis. One had a hypothesis, you know, and another one had another, but you would never see some governing board taking away the license or the certification because, oh my God, you dare to go against the narrative. Science is all about going against the narrative.
That's right.
I thrive on going the opposite and trying to prove the opposite side of the
every breakthrough, every major breakthrough, every like holy shit moment has come because either on purpose or by accident, someone has gone against the narrative and made a connection that previously had not been made. Period. I mean, that's literally what has to happen.
Look at the microbiome. I wouldn't have discovered the importance of bifidobacteria. I mean, I knew the importance of bifidobacteria because it's $1 trillion industry of probiotics. But then to actually see that bifidobacteria is absent in severe patients and present in high risk in low risk exposed to patients who never got it. That was like, wow, you know?
Yeah.
To see bifidobacteria is present in babies and then disappears in old people. That was a wow moment, you know, to see even that we're all different in our microbiome. We all have different fingerprints. We have different microbiomes, all of us. So how can we possibly be compared, right? You see these stool tests where they say, oh, test your stools and get to know your microbiome. Well, you're compared to who exactly?
Yeah, what's the data bank? You know, I mean,
and is
how many stool samples have they?
Yeah, but also, did that normal? Was she born in Morocco? Did she go to Spain? Did she go to Canada? Did she eat in Venezuela in the mountains? Did she travel to Japan? There's no way you can compare my microbiome with someone else because it's so diverse. I've been all over the place. You know, I've been in the jungle. I've been, you know, in Africa, you know. So it's probably a little bit like Zach Bush, my microbiome, you know. So the fact is that, you know, when you do these comparisons, when you do these normals, you know, it's just wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah. So I want to ask you because, and I this is funny that you mentioned this before, but you know, way before 2020, not way before, but I would say 2019, early 2019, you know, not ironically, I watched the movie Vaxxed.
Yes.
I don't know what drew me to it. But I think I was reading about how it was going to premiere and then they moved literally hell and high water to get De Niro, who I read had a vaccine injured
kid
and was, you know, passionate about the movie. And he held tight for a while, but then of course they were like, listen, we'll just shut the whole festival down. We'll just pull all your sponsors. When they couldn't get the friends to convince him, they said they're going to pull all the sponsors. So he had to pull the world premiere, but he saw that movie. And I believe he saw it for what it was the first time. And then of course, just like JFK and the people who saw the shooter behind the grassy knoll, they had to be told, no, what you saw was the shooter in the window. And then you hear all the people say, well, I know now it was the shooter in the window. No, you heard him behind the knoll. You saw it right the first time. Trust your eyes and ears.
We're into conspiracy theories here. So I mean, you know, that's what the whole conspiracy theory and all that. So I mean, you know, here's the thing. You know, Vaxxed, there's a hypothesis, because I know where you're going there, right? Because Vaxxed, there's a hypothesis about vaccines and autism, right?
Right.
It's still a hypothesis, right? What if it's not that? Or what if it is that, but in some kids, right?
Right.
So I think as a scientist, and I pride myself in being a scientist first and foremost, and I don't ever want to put myself in a rabbit hole.
Right.
I think it's important. I think it's important to have a differential diagnosis and to have multiple reasons that could be the
absolutely.
So I think when we look at, but unfortunately, you're right. There is one portion of the suppression of the narrative, right? When you look at someone like, what happened? Why was Robert De Niro? Why did he see the documentary? and has a kid with autism, and all of a sudden is not speaking on that. What happened that stopped him from doing that, right? And that's the big question, right? Because I think, I've worked with pharmaceutical companies. They're tough. It's not a pleasant work.
Yeah.
Because you have to fight with them and you have to make sure they stay on the path and righteous, etc. I'm the kind of person that likes to bring pharma to see the light and to say, hey guys, look, this is a problem. We need to look at that, right? And I'm the person that's going to keep pushing it until they see it, right? So I think more doctors need to be that way, especially more doctors in research, that if there's a question, if they see something, they need to alert, people about this, right? The big mistake we've seen right now with COVID is this whole suppression of the truth, suppression of asking questions, right? So
but that's what Vaxxed, that's what ended up being.
You have to be able to ask questions. If you're not allowed to ask questions and you're suppressing the asking of questions, there's a problem.
Yeah. And the actions taken, I mean, there's that movie was put behind a paywall, and you can find it now. But I think it's funny. Ironically, YouTube has the movie behind a paywall. No one watches it. It's been so derided. But if you read it, if you go to Wikipedia, it says Vaxxed is a 2016 American pseudoscience propaganda film. That's how it's described. It alleges a cover-up by the CDC of a purported link between the MMR vaccine and autism. And according to Variety, the film purports to investigate the claims of a senior scientist at the US CDC who revealed that the CDC had allegedly manipulated and destroyed data on an important study about autism and the MMR vaccine. Critics derided it as anti-vaccine propaganda film. The film was discredited and directed by anti-vaccine activist, suddenly he's an activist, Andrew Wakefield, who was struck off the medical register in the UK in 2010 due to his ethical violations in relation to his, quote, fraudulent research in his role on this film.
Yeah. And the thing is, for research to be valid, it needs to be valid, verified, and reproducible, right? In other words, other people need to reprove the same thing, right? Unfortunately, nobody's really looking at MMR because they don't believe in it, right? So because they don't believe that the MMR is the cause of autism, right? Because to the pediatrician, and again, this is where there's a different view, right? And we have to be looking at both sides, right? So if you look at, one side of people, the pediatrician that keeps giving MMR to all his kids, and then none of these kids develop autism, right? To that pediatrician, MMR is safe, right?
Right.
Now, to the mother who sees, because that's her reality, right? That's her world. To the mother that basically her kid gets the MMR and then all of a sudden stops talking, that's her new reality. That's her world, and that's all she believes because she is the mother. And, all these mothers are not crazy, right? We want to believe all these mothers are not crazy, right? You know your kid, you know what happened,
of course.
You know what you gave, you know what happened, right? So, this is the problem with the two realities. It's the same thing that we're dealing with. Remember that psychiatrist that I was telling you about? Yeah. That doesn't know what the microbiome is or fecal transplant. He believes because he was overweight, older, didn't get COVID, got vaccinated 4 times. He believes for him, the vaccine works. He's oblivious.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, of course. So what I'm saying is, there's a huge, but again, this is where two realities, right? Those people, like I have people that are, overweight, would have gotten COVID, would have probably done really poorly, got vaccinated, and they were fine, right? To those people, their reality is, oh my God, those anti-vaxxers, I'm still alive. Look at me. The vaccines work.
No
You
thanks.
cannot
Yeah.
ignore those reality, right, of that majority of population that believes that. Vice versa, the population that sees the side effects, that sees the clots for what they are, that sees microbiome damages from the vaccine, that is open-minded to all that, that sees further down, that is critical thinking, that population, oh my God, those doctors are crazy giving vaccinations, right? So again, this is where two realities are existing. And somehow we have to navigate the world and be middle ground and try to find the truth, right? I mean, that's my point, is finding the truth. What is the truth?
Yeah.
Who is telling the truth? Because there, I had a research monitor in my office, skinny guy, basically had 5 vaccines and got COVID 4 times. Okay. And then I had another, coordinator, 5 shots on clockwork, like, shot on time, and basically overweight, never got COVID, so here's those two cases, right? So what is what's going on there? Is weight, maybe.
I bet you if you checked their gut biome, you'd find out.
Well, yeah, I did see, I'm looking. So there is definitely, there's definitely a story there. So yeah. I'm not going to spoil it, but there's definitely
okay.
So, is it a slam dunk? The reality is, I think, if I look at scientists, everybody, to me, it's interesting because I'm a big, hey, we should write the data. Hey, and believe me, I've seen, it's interesting because I stepped into this with the eyes of, hey, I'm going to write as much data on the microbiome as possible.
Right.
And I kid you not, and I'm friends with a lot of people that are in academia, right? So when my hypothesis on ivermectin increases the bifidobacteria is thought to be, just today I got this email as basically considering retraction. They're going to retract my hypothesis. This is from a journal that's basically a predatory journal. Which I found out after the fact that it was a predatory journal. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a predatory journal, right? So here's the hypothesis. Now, this is what it did. What it did is they're going to retract it. But here's the problem with that is I'm friends with a lot of academic doctors from academia. And I'm basically calling all of them and saying, hey guys, look at this, my paper, because you know me, you don't know me, but I'm a little bit of a hurricane and shit stirrer. So I'm calling all my friends, Harvard, Mayo, all my people. And I'm like, look at this. This paper is a hypothesis was removed from a journal. You know what that's doing? That's opening people's eyes. People that didn't believe. If I had come out non-publishing, and I said, ivermectin works, right? Because that's the problem. A lot of frontline doctors, they're all talking about, hey, I've lost no one. I've done this. I've done that. Right. You've got to write the data. You've got to write the data. You've got to get it peer reviewed. So I did all those steps, right? I mean, nobody can criticize me for, I'm the one that wrote a whole protocol, 300 pages, submitted it to the FDA to get approved to give hydroxy, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc. So I did the clinical trials with the FDA watching me. I did the clinical trial on ivermectin, doxycycline, vitamin C, D, and zinc with FDA watching me. So nobody could say, well, Dr. Hazan didn't do the research the proper way. I did it the same way that pharmaceutical companies would do it, okay?
Yeah.
But here's the caveat. When I was doing clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, I could recruit like that. I would basically say, hey, you know what? You have a C.diff patient? Within a month, I would have 29 patients, okay?
Right.
In the middle of a pandemic, as a clinical research, site, I advertised on Facebook, Twitter, well, not Twitter, but Facebook, Instagram. We were shunned from Facebook and Instagram. We could not advertise. And as soon as I posted on my page, hey guys, anybody that has COVID, enter my trial, Guess what happened? We got phone calls that said, you're a criminal. You're trying to kill patients with hydroxychloroquine. It's a clinical trial. I'm running a clinical trial. You're doing a clinical trial on a vaccine or Paxlovid. It's a clinical trial. Why all of a sudden
Who was calling you?
Oh, people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, who knows who they are? Who knows who was paying them? But here's the thing, right? So that kind of, behavior, the FDA, the good side of the FDA notices that, right? Because the good agents, right, who lost a family member, they notice that. Because here I am, the girl that basically, has been doing clinical trials for pharma. Mm-hmm. Here I have brought drugs to market. Here I have done vaccine studies, right? With safety requirements and everything. So when things with COVID, and we could blame the emergency of COVID, etc., but that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse. So when I couldn't recruit, there was already a red flag for me that why can't I recruit? I'm doing my own clinical trial. And by the way, I wasn't only doing, hydroxychloroquine, I was doing others for COVID. So, it's interesting. The whole, there's definitely someone controlling this narrative and this movement. And I hope that, this move. So that psychiatrist that I gave you the example, I'm sure at the beginning when I said, because he called me an anti-vaxxer, and I said, first of all, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I put vaccines to market. Okay. Yeah, I'm anti this new technology. Yeah, it's a fast technology. The animal studies were done in 1 week. They killed the monkeys after 1 week. All of them. How are we going to make any decisions on this? And on top of that, I didn't really like the fact that, these vaccines were given at CVS with no informed consent. So, and, at the beginning, if you remember, it was CVS was giving the vaccine, not the doctor's office. Walmart, CVS. And then it went to the doctor's office. Oh, now the doctors are allowed to give the vaccine.
Remember, it had to be refrigerated. They were bringing in the super.
Yeah, I mean, so what?
And then they were like, "Oh, don't worry about it." I was like, "Wait, what? The doctors. You spend all that money on super refrigerating trucks, and then after you realized you couldn't keep them cool, you were like, "Oh, don't worry about it. The vaccines are fine." But they were opening the.
There were so many red flags. Okay, I mean, have French fries with the vaccine, have a donut. I mean, that's so anti.
Increase your chances of a heart attack.
Yeah, and also
donuts do that.
And also, how about telling people eat healthy, lose weight? How about these?
No, gyms were closed, beaches were closed.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing was just so chaotic and so. The best word is disgusting. That's all I can say. And it's really a shame for humanity to have handled it that way. They could have easily done, turned off the fire, tried, said, hey, you guys, you doctors on the front line, do whatever you want, turn off the fire, save as many lives as possible. Here's the vaccine. Let's try the vaccine. Let's turn off the fire. We haven't turned off this fire yet, by the way.
No.
So, why? Because we're not managing it properly, in my opinion, still to this day. I mean, we're not even looking at, COVID in the stools. Is COVID in the stools a transmission, maybe, that we've forgotten about? Maybe those toilets that you go into the bathroom and you smell that awful smell. Could that be COVID that you're smelling and therefore getting it? So I think, we've done very poorly, and it's a shame for humanity that, we have such a superior technology. We are so close to so many discoveries, and we choose to, go follow the money instead of following the science to better our health, to better our lives, to better our children's lives, to ensure safety for our children and that the planet continues to thrive, right? So, we had an opportunity to do good as humanity, and we didn't seize it. We had an opportunity to unite as humanity, and we didn't unite. So
no, we tried, but see, when you put people in a state of fear, people become assholes. For lack of a better word, the stress response to fear is fuck you, I need to get to where I'm going. I'm not usually so crass and use such profanity, but I'm just trying to simplify what happens. And you know this, I'm sure, as well as anyone. You know, there's no human being on the planet who's ever been stressed out and also, you know, very kind to people. Okay,
Well,
the two don't go hand in hand.
I'm going to tell you a secret. If you want to live longer, you probably got to calm that down, because that will kill the
Absolutely.
microbiome more than anything. So, you know, and I think that's the movement that I want to push is, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
If you're so angry, because the whole pandemic, people were so angry. My God,
That's right.
it was so annoying being on.
But they were being churned. That was being
Because
done to
it was
them.
all about politics, right? About the
Yep.
politicians. And I'm like, we're in the
Yeah,
middle of a pandemic. Can you guys calm
diabolical.
down about your politician? Who cares who's going to be president? Because guess what? We may be dead, right? I mean, here they had the fear of
Yep.
COVID that we're going to die. Well, who the hell cares who's going to be president if you're going to die, right? I mean, like no dying person said, oh my God, I want to know who's president.
Then they said Trump is responsible for 200,000 deaths. I was like, wait, what? What? I didn't even
Well,
know.
that's
Trump.
again, that was like, you
I
know,
was like, then
about
they're
it.
like, don't politicize this.
No, but
Donald Trump is responsible.
But this is
I
the
was like,
thing. They ignited you. They
that's right.
instigated you, and you let them get instigated. Not you personally, but I'm saying
Right.
people.
No, I know. That's how we ended up
I
with
listen to
Squad.
this and I laugh. Like I go, okay, you know, politician wants to be, you know, elected.
So
They're going to do
stupid.
drama on both sides, you know.
Oh yeah.
I just laugh because to me it's like it's so ridiculous. It doesn't impact my life. You know, Donald Trump is not going to save my life, right?
No.
Biden is not going to save my life. Biden is not going to be there giving me whatever CPR if I need it, right? So
That's for sure.
So a politician really doesn't affect my day to day. And I think the moment human beings start realizing, wait, I'm in it. I come alone in the planet and I leave alone. And I better make sure that what I do for me takes care of me and my family and my circle first, right?
That's right.
And then I worry about the rest of the world. But that's the thing. We need to build communities where we take care of our communities, and then we grow these communities. I think that's the answer. Right. But they don't want. But you can't sell drugs with those answers. You have to create trauma and marketing.
That's right. And their tactics of doing that can be very dishonest and despicable. But I
encourage people to look at them as tactics. Once you start looking at them as tactics and say, I'm not going to get upset about this, you'll live longer, you'll be happier, and then guess what? Whatever will be, will be. Because here's the thing about marketing. If you give it attention, it fuels itself, right?
That's right.
But if you don't give it a stage, it dies, right?
That's right.
We give it a stage. We allow the ignition to take on, and we get all heated up by this, right?
Yeah.
But if we calm down and we say, you know what? I'm going to take it better, and I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm going to just brush it off. Although sometimes I have to say, you can get heated. Like when your paper gets retracted after you've spent all this money writing it and editing it and everything. Yes, I'm getting heated. So that's the time to like start your own narrative.
Yeah, agreed. So while I have you on, I want to mine you for some gold for my audience that has faithfully been with me, because I love for them to walk away with something they can implement into their lives. You know, like if you could prescribe I shouldn't use the word prescribe, but you know, if you could recommend like the best diet, like 5 foods that would be the best for the healthy gut biome, what would you recommend?
So the first thing that I would say is, you know, I'm a big fan of, you know, vegetables that are underground, my beets, my fennel, my sweet potatoes, my, you know, those are my vegetables. You know, the pineapples, the avocados, you know, things that are on the trees. I'm a big fan of, you know, fermented foods, old cheeses. You know, I'm very I'm a big fan of small farms, foods from small farms. I like to know who my farmer is.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a big, you'll never, you know, I'm not a big shopper at big superstores or mega stores. You know, I don't know if the yogurt was left over the counter overnight
Yeah.
and then put in the fridge because they're so busy and so massive. I prefer my little corner store where I know the guy is like taking the yogurt that he got as a shipment and he puts it in the fridge directly because he wants to have that return customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm more, you know, neighborhood farms, neighborhood stores, small stores, you know, give back to the community. It's not, you know, the microbiome is not only about nutrition. It's really about peace. It's about sense of humor, laughter, you know, so I encourage people to just, you know, go see a show that makes you laugh, happy stuff, you know, avoid the falling for the horror, gory, bloody movies.
The news.
You know, the news, if something upsets you, turn it off. No need to listen to it. Don't aggravate what bothers you inside, right? If you feel like, oh, I'm so gassy, bloated, I've just listened to this and this person irks, you know, I can't stand listening to this person, or I can't stand this president. You know what I mean? Stop.
My God, stop.
Turn it off.
Turn. Absolutely. I mean, you're poisoning yourself because you're making yourself sick. You know?
And hate kills your microbiome. I think bring on love, bring on, you know, more of the good stuff, more of the light, right?
Yeah.
We need light. We need hope. We need unity. So, you know, go give a hug to someone you love, you know, feel better. You've had a hard day, and then don't sweat the small stuff. You know, I don't argue with my husband anymore because I know if I'm going to argue, is it worth killing my microbiome? No, I'm going to like pick my fights. Right. So, you know, maybe if he didn't clean up the closet, I'm going to kind of like not look at it. Right. So it's not worth me killing myself because of my, you know, an obsession of like the closet needs to be clean.
Yeah.
Right?
Just habitual kind of OCD.
Yeah. I think drop down your OCD, drop down that behavior that makes you.
I got to talk to my wife about this, but I'm way ahead of you. I have succeeded in that, although I still get in trouble a lot, you know. Like, you know,
I think that's important, you know, and you know, I always say be nice to your spouse because you may need their shit for real. So
that's right.
The spouse,
literally in your case,
you know, so
wow. So leaky gut is a global problem.
Leaky gut is a gut dysbiosis. It's an imbalance in the microbiome, and so it's your good stuff is down and your bad stuff is high, and therefore viruses penetrate, bacteria that secrete toxins penetrate. So that's leaky gut. It's an inflammation. So you want to bring back the balance in your microbiome. That's simplistically put.
So for people who have chronic indigestion of one shape or another, you know, whether it's like, oh, you know, like they realize that, okay, they're probably lactose intolerant, you know, they've had their gallbladder out, like the digestive issues, you know, they can't seem to get a finger on the pulse. And I know more than one person who falls into this kind of category. Like they're trying to figure out what it is they can eat, what it is they can't eat, what is causing the disruption that is coming all too frequently in their life. What do you think is, you know, because there seems to be a consistent pattern of, you know, of things that are going on with these people. You know, it goes from like nausea to, you know, diarrhea. I mean,
that's a loaded question, right? I mean, there's multiple differential diagnoses. Is it a motility disorder? Is it you know, a nerve problem? Is there a lesion in there? Is there a compression on the stomach? It's a loaded question. You know, this is what medicine, and this is the problem, by the way, with, you know, doing talk shows where people ask these things and thinking like there's a solution to indigestion, for example. Is indigestion a gut dysbiosis? Maybe. Is indigestion, you know, too much acid, too little acid, too much bile? Is indigestion a problem with the sphincter between your stomach and the esophagus, right? Is it wide open? Did you drink too much coffee and weaken it? Do you have a nerve problem? Do you have a motion problem of the esophagus? Do you have a spasm? Do you have a nutcracker esophagus? Do you have gastroparesis? Does your stomach move properly? So there's a whole differential. This is why you go to the GI doctors. So my recommendation always is do not confuse a medical talk show or a podcast or Twitter with your doctor.
Right.
Get seen. So, and I'll tell you, because we all fall into that, right? So I fall into that even myself because I'm in the microbiome space. So now I'm, everything is microbiome to me, right? Because I'm in the microbiome space. But I have to remind myself, when people come to me and they have, weight loss, indigestion, I have to say, you're 45. Have you had a colonoscopy, right? Because that's the standard of care. I have to ask the questions, right? So I think we have to still follow the guidelines. What I do is more research. So I'm outside the box and I can talk about the research because I'm excited about it. But I think we still have to follow the guidelines of medicine and all that. And, your GI doctors are amazing. They're not doing fecal transplant yet because they're not allowed.
Right.
But, they are doing it for seniors. But they are still amazing. They know how to do a workup and they're trying with what they have right now. So it's up to people like me and my colleagues to speed up the research to get us to where, it becomes guidelines. Fecal transplant, it took about 20 years to be part of the guidelines, surprisingly. When Dr. Barodi was doing it in the 80s, nobody was really paying attention. Now it is actually part of the guidelines. Dr. Stolman and Dr. Colleen Kelly wrote the guidelines. And, if you've had C.diff twice, you can have fecal transplant. But it took 20 years to get to this level.
My God.
So hopefully, but thank God for doctors like that were not biased by pharmaceutical companies and said, wait a minute, I'm getting 92% success with fecal transplant rather than an antibiotic. I'm going to go with fecal transplant because I want to help my patient. So thank God for the college. There's still very good doctors out there. It really pains me when I hear the public criticizing physicians because you don't understand they're handcuffed. They are handcuffed.
I understand,
And it's so, there was this news that you saw on Twitter where they basically blamed the doctors and they said Blue Cross Blue Shield incentivized doctors. Did you see that? The doctors were paid to give the vaccines. There's no such thing. First of all, it's against the law. You can't give an incentive because it's the kickback law. It's impossible. So there's narrative that are going out there just to discredit physicians and again, to divide us, right? Because if we have a strong relationship with our physicians and we support our physicians, well, pharma cannot get to the public, right? Think about it. In the olden days, the pharmaceutical company would come to the doctor's office to educate the doctor on the drug, right? And then somewhere along the line, they said, oh, the doctor's getting a lunch or a pen that's biasing the doctor with the drug. Therefore, let's stop all that. We're no longer going to the doctor. But then what do? They're going to the public in the media. How many advertisements do you see on drugs on television? So they don't need the doctor anymore. The patient goes to the doctor and says, hey, I saw this ad on for rheumatoid arthritis.
Over and over.
Why aren't you giving it to me? You're such a bad doctor that you're not giving me this drug, right? But the doctor's like, well, I don't know the side effects of this drug. I haven't read up too much on it. This is new. The doctor's trying to do the right thing. So it's a bit of a problem, and it's very difficult to practice medicine in these days, And I really feel sorry for the clinician out there that is trying.
I listen. I know very well the extent that doctors are handcuffed and militarized in a lot of ways, in the way that they have to follow orders,
right,
or find another or risk all that schooling. They're finally in a place where they're practicing.
Right.
It takes a very unique individual to say
unique. Yes.
I'm not going to do that.
And
I
to
don't care what it costs me,
and nonstop to listen to patient suffering.
Yeah.
Imagine every day, every minute,
Yeah.
one more patient is presenting their case. It's difficult. It's a very difficult position to be in. And by the way, it's really, it's not it's not a requirement for physicians to treat patients. At any point, they can step back and say, you know what, I'm done. So if a doctor keeps coming back to the office, it's because he cares.
I understand.
So anyway,
wait a minute. I thought that there was.
Wrap it up because I have
we're going to wrap it up.
Yes.
I just one thing you said. I thought that it because vaccines fall out of the normal, FDA approval, and I mean they're their own animal now. They even have their own court and have since 1986. But as you know, I'm sure, but I understood that it was very common practice, and I didn't learn this from this recent bout of propaganda, which is always floating around, cyberspace, but that doctors do in fact get, if and that they did this to incentivize people to get vaccinated. That if a doctor had like 90% of his patients on, and this is pre-COVID.
I don't believe that. I don't know. I don't believe that. I'm
pretty sure that's a thing.
I don't believe it. I mean, I know that doctors follow guidelines. They're afraid of losing their licenses. I know what I've seen during the pandemic. Yes, there were some, scare tactics for doctors, but on the whole, I think I still believe in physicians practicing medicine well, in my opinion, believing that they practice medicine. Again, it's a perception, right? Yeah. It's the perception. Like I said, the pediatrician that keeps giving vaccines and doesn't see any side effects versus the perception of the mom who was, at the same moment that her kid was vaccinated, the kid stops talking. It's a different perception, and therefore it's a different reality. Okay. So we have to be sensitive to the differences in reality of each individual human. Listen, planet Earth is complex, right? Human beings are complex. And at the end of the day, I try to believe that we're all here to learn something and on a mission. And some of us are just here to kind of maybe balance things or stir up shit to recreate the balance. I think, we have a responsibility on the planet. We have a responsibility on the future of humanity. We have a responsibility as human beings to do good and to help each other. That's our responsibility. And I'm a huge believer that if you do good, good comes back. Listen, Absolutely. My life is simple or not simple, it's complex, but, I've been privileged because of, I'm giving back. I'm constantly giving back. So I think there's no magic to that, right? You help someone and then next thing you know, it helps you. It makes you feel good. Absolutely. People should try that, help a poor person and then feel good about it. Help a homeless, feel good about it. That there's nothing quite like that feel good feeling that you've helped someone. And it's so funny because it is frustrating. Sometimes you go, oh my God, that person, why that person again, etc. And, my husband, like he'll see me, I'm losing patience with patients. And he'll say, you just can't help yourself in helping them, right? Even though they're frustrating the hell out of you because they're constantly doing the same wrong things that you told them to do the right way to begin with, right? I'm like, I told you not to eat 12 donuts. How hard is that? So you get frustrated with them, right? Yeah. But you still don't give up on them because you know that they have an addiction to donuts, probably because their microbiome is craving the donuts, right? Or that anxious person with Parkinson's, you know that they have possibly a dysbiosis causing the constipation and therefore the anxiety. And so even though I have this radar for anxiety, like I sense people's anxiety, it's like my microbiome feels them so badly. Yeah. So, so when you feel that and you have to be sensitive to that. Yeah. But it's tough. So again, this is why kumbaya, at the end of the day, Kumbaya. That's it.
You've
It
shared
was a
so much.
pleasure.
It was absolute pleasure, and you've shared so much wisdom.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I do believe the microbiome is absolutely the future.
Yes.
And that when we start to figure that out, and it's a complex puzzle, it's going to take us a long time, but we will find a greater state of health for the human being. So you're on the front line, and
realizing the microbiome is like trillions of bugs with trillions of possibilities. And it's really the signature of God, all these microbes, connected together. So we have to believe that there's got to be a God to create all this, because it's really, and I always say this in science, the destruction of science is ego. We have to be humble. I could know my shit, or I may not know shit, right? But at the end of the day, I have to be humble that there's a whole 97% that I don't know.
Yeah.
That's it.
Such a
we only know the 1%.
There's a greater intelligence operating in each and every one of us, and in all life. But it's like you have to be humble in the face of that, because it's so profound. Thank you so much, Doc. I appreciate you. And we'll be in touch when this is all going to come out. Perfect. And I'm following you on Twitter, and I love what you're doing. So thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Take care. Thank you. Bye bye.